June 20th, 1942. Noon hits hard under a blazing Polish sun. A sleek black convertible idles at the main gate of Auschwitz. The Nazis' deadliest killing machine. The wooden barrier stays down. An SS sergeant steps forward, hand inching toward his pistol. Inside the car, 4 gaunt figures in crisp SS uniforms. But here's the twist. They're not officers. They're prisoners. Starved skeletons who've endured 2 years of hell. One weighs just 88 pounds. Hidden in the backseat, a 40-page report that could expose the gas chambers and crematoriums to the world and maybe turn the tide of the war. The engine purrs like a predator. Sweat beads on the driver's forehead. The sergeant squints through the glare, suspicion rising. No papers, no clearance. In 10 seconds, this could end in bullets or freedom. But the passenger, Kazimierz Piechowski, a 22-year-old Polish scout turned underdog legend, leans out, face twisted in fury. He barks orders in perfect German, waving a stolen Luger like he owns the place. The sergeant freezes, salutes, and lifts the barrier. They roar out. Guards snap to attention as 4 subhumans, the very people Nazis mark for death, drive straight through the front door of history's most efficient death factory, in the Commandant's own car, with his guns. It's like Ocean's 11, but in a nightmare where the stakes are genocide. This isn't just a wild escape story. It's proof that sheer audacity can crack even the unbreakable, beating the odds when survival seems impossible. But at what cost? How did 4 ordinary prisoners outsmart the entire SS machine? And what 5 whispered words from a doomed man sparked the boldest breakout Auschwitz ever saw? To get how they turned invisibility into invincibility, we've got to rewind to the gray dawn where it all began. Inside the gates of hell itself. June 20th, 1942. That black convertible roaring out of Auschwitz, it all traces back to a world built on barbed wire and broken spirits. Let's rewind 2 years, to when Kazimierz Piechowski, our underdog hero, first stepped into hell. Born in 1919 in rural Poland, Piechowski was your classic Boy Scout type. Adventurous, resourceful, loyal. By age 20, he joined the underground resistance against the Nazi invasion. Think American Dream meets WWII Grit, a young guy fighting for his homeland, smuggling messages, dodging patrols. But in June 1940, the Gestapo caught him, stripped him of everything, shipped him to Auschwitz as prisoner number 918, just 21 years old. 2 brutal years carved him into a survivor. He hauled concrete blocks under gunpoint, watched typhus ravage friends, saw men beaten to pulp for stumbling. "I learned to expect nothing but suffering," he later said in interviews. His body wasted away, bones poking through skin, down to 88 pounds. But his scout skills, they sharpened. Invisibility became his armor. Head down, no eye contact, blend in. Motivation? Pure defiance. He wasn't just enduring, he was plotting quiet acts of sabotage like slowing work details without getting caught. Flaws? The camp burned out his innocence. Paranoia set in. Trust no one. Hope for nothing. Yet that same trauma fueled his edge. War taught him resilience, like a vet turning PTSD into street smarts. Irony hits hard. The Nazis aimed to crush subhumans like him, but they forged a master of deception. This isn't just backstory, it's a wake-up call. Adversity doesn't break you if you adapt. Piechowski's rags to resistance start shows how grit turns victims into victors, but at a soul-crushing cost. But then, everything changed. One gray morning in early June 1942, while heaving blocks, a friend fell in step beside him. Eugeniusz Bandera, a Ukrainian mechanic with grease-stained hands and a death sentence hanging over him. His whisper, 5 words that ignited the impossible. "My name's on the death list." Armed with that spark and skills honed in the shadows, they started crafting a plan that would fool the master race itself. Those 5 whispered words, "My name's on the death list," hit Piechowski like a gut punch. Drawing on his scout instincts and that unyielding grit forged in 2 years of Auschwitz hell, he didn't flinch. Face blank, hands steady on the concrete blocks. But inside, adrenaline surged. Bandera wasn't just any friend. This Ukrainian mechanic, nicknamed Ganek by the inmates, had grease under his nails and access to the camp's motor pool. Every truck, every staff car, including Commandant Rudolf Huss's prized Steyr 220 convertible, the fastest ride in that godforsaken place. Most escape attempts were desperate scrambles, cutting fences at night, bribing capos for outside work details, or hiding in shipments. The SS saw it all coming. They'd honed their traps through bloody trial and error. Deputy Commandant Karl Fritsch made it clear at every roll call. One escapee meant 10 random prisoners executed. Escape math equaled mass murder. But Bandera's plan? It flipped the script. No sneaking like rats. Drive out the front gate in SS uniforms, saluting the guards as you pass. Become the enemy to beat them. Audacious? Hell yeah. Suicidal? Maybe. But in a place where hope was contraband, it sparked something electric. Piechowski had his own ace. Rotations through the storage warehouse, where SS gear sat under lax watch. He knew the racks of tunics, the shelves of Luger pistols. 4 uniforms, 4 guns, 4 men playing Aryan overlords. The pieces snapped together, but they needed 2 more guys willing to bet their lives on this madness. Recruiting in Auschwitz? Trust was a loaded weapon. Pick wrong, and it's torture chambers for everyone. What if the guy snitches for an extra ration? One wrong whisper, game over. Bandera floated the idea in hushed barracks talks. First recruit practically volunteered, Stanisław Jaster, 19. Another Polish scout busted for resistance work. Jaster spoke flawless German, hidden from the guards, 'cause useful skills made you a target. But his real gold? A 40-page report smuggled from Witold Pilecki, a resistance officer who'd volunteered for Auschwitz to document the horrors. Gas chambers pumping Zyklon B, crematoriums belching smoke 24/7, medical experiments that turned humans into lab rats. If Jaster got out, that intel hits Warsaw's underground, then London. The Allies finally see Auschwitz for what it is. Not a labor camp, but a death factory. The 4th, Józef Lempart, a 50-something Catholic priest. He'd spent months giving last rites to the dying, his calm eyes hiding a righteous rage. When Piechowski laid it out, Lempart crossed himself and nodded. No hesitation. Prayer alone won't end this, he said quietly. 4 men sealed, a scout, a mechanic, a kid with secrets, a holy man with fire in his veins. Early wins piled up fast. They picked June 20th, 1942, a Saturday. Work ends at noon, guards slack off during lunch. Motor pool empties, warehouses go quiet. A 15-minute chaos window. Tactics clicked into gear. Bandera pressed the motor pool key into soap, filed a duplicate from scrap metal that night. Tested it twice. Perfect fit. Piechowski loosened a cellar trapdoor bolt at the warehouse, creating a stealth entry. Jaster drilled German phrases, stiffening his posture like a drill sergeant. Lempart prayed and stood watch. They mapped every step. Slip from work at 11:30, meet at an unfinished barracks, load a garbage cart for cover, bluff the inner gate, ditch it, break in, suit up, steal the car, drive out. No papers? Bluff with arrogance. SS officers didn't explain themselves. These prep moves felt like small victories. Keys turning, doors creaking open in their minds. Prove preparation beats blind luck every time? Resourcefulness in the jaws of death? That's how underdogs become legends. Apply it to your own grind. Map the risks, stock your tools, and push. But whispers of doubt crept in. Locals outside the wire might spot them. And that gate sergeant? No forged stamps meant relying on sheer balls. These early highs felt unstoppable until recruiting wrapped and the real countdown to D-Day kicked in. That careful planning from the whispers and early preps, it slammed into its first real wall, recruiting in a snake pit like Auschwitz. Trust wasn't just rare, it was lethal. One loose lip could unravel everything, landing them all in the torture blocks or worse. Piechowski and Bandera knew the stakes. Pick the wrong guy, and it's phenol injections for the whole crew. No trial, no mercy. What if the recruit cracks under a guard's glare, or sells out for a scrap of bread? Game over before it starts. They started subtle, in the shadows of Block 11, the punishment barracks where screams echoed like ghosts. Bandera floated hints during work breaks. eyes scanning for reactions. Step 1. ID potentials. Piechowski drew on his scout smarts, reading faces like maps. Hollow cheeks, defiant glints, signs of unbroken spirits. But paranoia bit hard. A guy nods too eagerly? Suspect. Too quiet? Hiding something. First close call hit fast. They approached a fellow Pole who'd griped about the SS. He listened, eyes widening. Then he backed away, muttering about suicide. Piechowski adapted quick. Cut him off mid-sentence, laughed it off as a joke. Forget I said anything. Heart pounding, they melted back into the work line. Sensory overload, sweat-stinging eyes, the metallic tang of fear in the air. Guards' boots crunching gravel nearby. 30 seconds of pure tension. Did he buy it? Or was a report already heading up the chain? They pivoted. Bandera remembered Stanisław Jaster from Resistance Whispers. 19, sharp as a blade. Step 2, the approach. In a barracks corner, under flickering bulb light, Piechowski laid it bare. Drive out in uniforms, no hiding. Jaster didn't blink. I'm in. Why? He had skin in the game. That smuggled 40-page Pilecki report burning a hole in his oilcloth wrap. Exposing the gas chambers? Worth dying for. But the win came with a hitch. Jaster's fluent German was gold, but his youth screamed risk. What if he froze under pressure? Last piece, Josef Lempart, the priest. Step 3, the wild card pitch. Piechowski found him after evening roll call, June 9th, 1942. Lempart's hands trembled from cold, but his voice was steel. I've seen enough death. Count me in. No questions, just a cross and a nod. Adaptation in action. Piechowski read the fury behind the faith, turning a holy man into their moral anchor. Sensory hit, the barracks reek of unwashed bodies, Lempart's whispered prayer cutting through like a lifeline. Boom, team locked, 4 men against the Reich. This victory tasted sweet. Early doubts crushed, alliance forged in fire. Proved adaptability saves the day, key for navigating life's curveballs. Twist them your way, or they twist you, but it jacked the stakes sky high. Now, with just 11 days to June 20th, every whispered plan, every filed key, carried the weight of betrayal. Whispers from capos hinted at snitches in the ranks. This win opened doors to execution, but also to bigger risks, like that ticking clock and the ghosts of failed escapes haunting their steps. Fresh off that nail-biting team lockdown, the real mess kicked in. An 11-day sprint to June 20th, 1942, where every tick of the clock layered on complications. Piechowski and the crew thought they had the blueprint, but hubris crept in early. We've got the keys to the kingdom, Bandera whispered one night. Success in recruiting made them feel invincible, like they could outsmart the Reich with scrap metal and prayers. Big mistake. Hubris blinds even the smartest. Stay grounded or the ground swallows you. First twist, the prep phase turned into a paranoia factory. They divvied up tasks, but whispers of snitches haunted every move. Bandera, the mechanic, pressed that motor pool key into soap during a lunch break on June 10th. Filed it from junk that night in the barracks shadows. Close call number 1, a capo, one of those prisoner overseers turned Nazi lapdog, strolled by mid-file. Bandera froze, heart slamming. He coughed to cover the scrape of metal. The capo sneered but kept walking. Risk level? Skyrocketing. What if that sound echoed? One report and it's the death list for all. Evolution hit fast. From vague ideas to high-stakes ops, Piechowski hit the warehouse on June 12th, loosening that cellar trapdoor bolt. Tools? A scavenged nail, twisted just right. But guards patrolled tighter that week. Rumors of a failed escape attempt elsewhere in the camp had the SS on edge. Piechowski adapted, timed his sabotage to shift changes, ducking behind crates as boots thumped overhead. Sensory overload, dust choking his throat, sweat blinding him. He got it done, but paranoia spiked. What if they noticed the loose bolt, he thought. Minor win, major foreshadow. Authority crackdowns were brewing, with extra roll calls and random shakedowns. Then Jaster's drill sessions added layers. The kid practiced SS postures and barks in stolen moments, June 13th through 15th. Heil Hitler, he'd mutter under his breath, stiff as a board. But here's the insane part. Success made him cocky. He slipped once, practicing too loud near a barracks window. A fellow inmate overheard, eyes narrowing. Betrayal alert? Jaster played it off as mockery, but the crew sweated it. Lempert, the priest, layered in moral gray areas, praying for forgiveness while plotting theft. "Are we heroes or sinners?" he confided to Piechowski. "You decide. In hell, lines blur. Rising risks sequenced like dominoes." By June 16th, they sealed a grim pact. If caught, swallow a hidden shard or charge the guards. No torture, no names spilled. Hubris peaked here. They felt untouchable with their tools lined up. But copycat fears emerged. Other prisoners catching wind, maybe plotting their own grabs. And the big complication? No papers for the gate. Piechowski lay awake nights, visions of suspicious sergeants flashing. Evolution from small sabotage to full-blown impersonation meant global stakes. Jaster's report could alert the Allies, but failure meant reprisals on families back home. These twists piled on, turning prep into psychological warfare. Reflective hit. Overconfidence turns wins into traps. Fame, or in this case, the illusion of control, can be your biggest enemy. The crew evolved from broken men to calculated risk-takers, but the heat was cranking. Disguises? Check. Guns? Planned. But betrayals loomed like shadows. These complications were building to an inevitable showdown. D-Day itself, where one wrong glance could end it all. All those complications, the snitch fears, the close calls, the ticking paranoia, exploded on D-Day, June 20th, 1942. Noon loomed under a scorching sun that wilted even the SS guards. Piechowski, Bandera, Jaster, and Lempart, they were ghosts in motion. At 11:30 a.m., they slipped from work details one by one, hearts jackhammering, converged in the attic of an unfinished barracks on the camp's edge. The air thick with sawdust and mildew, light slicing through slats like knives. Lempert led a hushed prayer, not for themselves, but for the souls they'd leave behind, and the families they might never hold again. Time froze as they descended, loaded a wooden garbage cart with rotting peels, cabbage sludge, and coal dust. Flies buzzed in angry clouds. Piechowski and Bandera gripped the front handles. Jaster and Lempart steadied the sides. They shuffled toward the inner gate, mimicking the defeated trudge of every striped uniform in Auschwitz. Shoulders slumped, eyes glued to gravel. Purposeful but slow, invisible labor drones. Above them, those iron letters mocked. Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. Today, it might actually deliver. Confrontation 1. The inner gate guard. He shifted lazily, bored on a Saturday. The stench hit him like a wall. Sweat, decay, filth. He wrinkled his nose, hand drifting to his clipboard. 3 eternal seconds. Piechowski's pulse thundered. Would he demand papers? Check the roster? One wrong word and bullets fly. But the guard waved them through with a disgusted flick. Partial win. They breached the administrative zone. No cheers, no glances. Just push on, heads down. Ditch the cart in shadows behind the warehouse. Piechowski led to the sabotage cellar trap door. Bolt slid free with a faint scrape. Metal on wood, echoing in his skull. Dropped into cool dark, climbed a rickety ladder. Upstairs door locked. Jaster rammed it twice. Wood groaned. Third hit splintered the frame. Boom. In. Rows of SS tunics, Luger holsters, Mauser rifles. An enemy arsenal, barely guarded. For a heartbeat they stared, overwhelmed. Then action surged, stripped off lice-ridden stripes, pulled on wool that felt alien, clean, heavy against scarred skin. Piechowski buckled an Untersturmführer's tunic, silver insignia gleaming. Jaster and Lempart as enlisted grunts, caps low over shaved heads. 4 minutes flat, skeletons morphed into gaunt Nazis. Piechowski caught his hollow-eyed stare in a cracked mirror. Authority radiated back, psychological armor, holstered a loaded Luger, checked the chamber twice. Weight settled like fate. Outside, engine cough. Bandera had ghosted to the motor pool. Duplicate key turning smooth. Slid into Huss's black Steyr 220. Chrome shining, paint mirror slick. Coaxed it to life, purred around to the warehouse. 3 SS men climbed in. Piechowski shotgun, Jaster and Lempart in back with rifles. Pilecki's report tucked against Jaster's chest. Pause, this was real. Then Bandera gunned it. As they rolled toward the main gate, an SS private snapped a salute. Arm rigid, fingers quivering. Piechowski nodded coldly, no slow. More guards followed suit. Each could unravel them, spot the loose fits, the prison pallor, the sweat. But uniforms blinded them. Lempart gripped his rifle, lips moving in silent pleas. Jaster's knuckles whitened. Through the windshield, the final barrier. Wooden beam, barbed coils. Sergeant eyeing them, hand on pistol. Beyond, open road, freedom's whisper. Failure loomed, no papers, suspicion brewing. But this peak showdown revealed defiance's raw edge. Outfox the machine or die trying. The true cost? Souls scarred forever. When the dust settled on this mad dash, the real consequences, alarms, chases, heartbreaks, hit hard. After that mad dash through the gate, barrier scraping the roof, Sergeant's face twisting from confusion to horror, the real fallout crashed down. Shouts erupted behind them. Alarms clanged like frantic bells, fading as Bandera floored it. 200 meters out, then dirt tracks swallowed the Steyr. They drove 2 hours through twisting forests, dodging phantom roadblocks. Fuel tank dipping empty, they pulled into a thicket near WWII, 50 miles southwest. Wiped prints, ditched the car. On foot into the woods, exhilarated but wrecked. Piechowski pressed his face to the cool earth and wept. Freedom after 730 days of nightmare. They split to boost odds. Lempart, drained, sheltered with a village priest. Jaster trekked to Warsaw, Pilecki's 40-page bombshell against his chest. That report hit Polish resistance, then Allied desks in London. One of the first hard proofs of Auschwitz's gas chambers and crematoriums, exposing the Holocaust machinery. Piechowski and Bandera headed east, joining partisan fighters, waging guerrilla war till 45. None recaptured. Loose ends tied. 4 lives reclaimed from the jaws of death. But victory's price? Savage. Back at camp, Commandant Huss exploded in rage. His car, uniforms, guns, stolen by subhumans. Reprisals hit hard. Jaster's parents arrested, shipped to Auschwitz, perished in the same hell their son escaped. Huss ordered tattoos for all prisoners, permanent ID numbers seared into skin. No more uniform swaps. The system tightened because 4 men proved it could crack. Stats sting. Over 1.1 million died there by liberation. 4 escapes out of millions? A drop, but a defiant one. Piechowski reflected later. We showed the impossible was possible. No denials. He owned the trauma, testifying till his death in 2017 at 98. In interviews, he'd say, "Audacity saved us, but the camp stole our innocence." Legacy endures. His story educates schools, fuels Holocaust remembrance. Even in 2026, with echoes of division lingering, it warns against unchecked hate. This downfall, not of the men, but of Nazi invincibility, teaches 2 keys. Unchecked ambition, like the Reich's, leads to ruin. Balance power with humanity. And resilience beats odds. Apply it daily. Triumph laced with tragedy. Heroes rose, but at family graves cost. But even in this hard-won escape, the story leaves a lasting mark, proving one bold act can ripple through history forever. But even in this hard-won escape, the story leaves a lasting mark, proving one bold act can ripple through history forever. Let's zoom out to the legacy these 4 men carved from the ashes of Auschwitz. Piechowski, Bandera, Jaster, and Lempart didn't just survive, they shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. Jaster's trek to Warsaw delivered Pilecki's report straight to the Polish underground, then to Allied intelligence in London. It was one of the earliest, most detailed eyewitness accounts of the gas chambers, crematoriums, and experiments, forcing the world to confront the Holocaust's horrors head-on. Piechowski and Bandera melted into the forest, linking up with partisan units. They fought guerrilla style against the occupiers until the war's end in 1945. Lempart found refuge in a quiet village, his faith unbroken but forever scarred. The numbers hit hard. Out of over 1 million souls lost at Auschwitz, these 4 were among the handful who escaped. Their breakout didn't stop the machine. The camp churned on until Soviet forces liberated it in January 1945. But it sparked change. Commandant Hus, humiliated by his own car vanishing under his nose, ramped up cruelty. He mandated permanent tattoos for all prisoners, identification numbers inked into flesh, making future disguises impossible. And the reprisals? Brutal. Joster's parents were dragged to the camp and killed, a grim reminder that freedom for some meant death for others. Piechowski lived the longest, passing in 2017 at 98 in Gdansk, Poland. He spent decades as a living testament, speaking at schools, giving interviews, ensuring the world remembered. We proved even in darkness, the impossible is possible, and he'd say. His story echoes today, a beacon against tyranny, showing how ordinary folks, armed with audacity and grit, can defy empires. Key lessons? First, resilience turns victims into victors, but always count the cost. Unchecked power, like the Nazis, crumbles under its own weight. Second, one act of defiance can echo eternally, inspiring us to stand up in our own battles. In 2026, with echoes of division still around, this tale reminds us, humanity wins when we refuse to break. If this story fired you up, hit that like button, drop a comment below. What would you do in their shoes? And subscribe for more epic tales of grit and glory. What's next? Tell me in the comments, which story or character do you want us to dive into?